Hi guys, it's Mia Penfold here at ASA, All Strings Attached. I'm going to read an article today on Daily Mail, Mail Online, by Amy Gordon. So I'm going to go ahead. The title starts quite abruptly, so just warning you. By the time you read this, I'll be dead. British man 80 leaves haunting letter as he ends his life at Dignitas after his wife was warned by police she faced 14 years in jail for helping him. Jeffrey Whaley, who has motor neuron disease, ended his life at Dignitas Clinic in Switzerland at 10 a.m. today. He penned an emotional letter calling for a change to the law after his 76-year-old wife was interviewed by the police. The grandfather sobbed for the first time in 52 years when his wife Anne was warned she faces 14 years in jail. Mr. Whaley said the law in the UK robbed him from control over his death and punished those trying to help him. The 80-year-old said the final weeks of his life had been blighted by visits from social services and police. A British man with motor neuron disease has penned an emotional letter to MPs to publish the moments before he ended his life at Dignitas Clinic today. Retired accountant Jeffrey Whaley from Buckinghamshire chose to die in Switzerland rather than face his immense suffering at the end of his stages of devastating condition. The grandfather of four, 80, died peacefully in his wife's arms, surrounded by his family and friends. The Charity of Dignity in Dying said today. Just moments before he passed away at 10 a.m., he posted a haunting letter to the government calling for change in the law which he had said robbed me of control over my death. He revealed how he sobbed for the first time in 5 decades when his wife was grilled by the police for helping him die, adding, "The law sought to punish those attempting to help me get there. The hypocrisy and the cruelty of this is astounding. Mr. Whaley wanted assisted suicide to be made legal in the UK after his wife of 52 years, Anne, was interviewed under caution last week as she was warned she faces 14 years in prison. When asked about helping her husband commit suicide, 76-year-old Mrs. Whaley said, "I don't think of it like that, because when you've got a husband as brave as mine, you have to support him." The letter's here, so I'm going to go ahead and read this as well. By the time you read this, I will be dead. 7th of February 2019. An open letter to all MPs from Jeffrey Whaley, written before his death at Dignitas. Dear Members of Parliament, by the time you read this, I will be dead. On Thursday the 7th of February 2019, I will have taken medication that will end my life surrounded by my wife Anne, my children Alex and Dominique, and a couple of my dearest friends at the Dignitas facility in Switzerland. With their love and support, I have been able to fulfill my final wish to be in control of my end rather than endure the immense suffering of motor neuron disease it had in store for me. I want to impress upon you the anguish me and my family have experienced, not only because of this awful illness, though of course this has been incredibly difficult, but because of the law against assisted dying in this country. The blanket ban on assisted dying has not only forced me to spend thousands of pounds to endure months of logistical hurdles in order to secure my peaceful, dignified death overseas, but it has meant that my final weeks of life have been blighted by visits from social services and police. The law in this country robbed me of control over my death, and it forced me to seek solace in Switzerland. Then it sought out to punish those attempting to help me get there. The hypocrisy and the cruelty is outstanding. Though it is perfectly legal for me to make arrangements to travel to the Dignitas by myself, the minute anybody assists me in any way, which is essential, due to my condition, they are liable for prosecution. I had the chance just over a week before my death to speak to some MPs and peers about my experience and my adamant wish for the law to change. The overwhelming reaction in the room was one of agreement. However, I am aware that despite the huge public support and assisted dying law, most members of Parliament currently oppose it. I spoke to one MP who had voted against the last assisted dying bill in 2015. The law being proposed was limited to terminally ill, mentally competent adults in their final months, with strict inbuilt safeguards to protect the vulnerable and anyone else who has not made a clear decision of their own violation. When I pressed her on why she felt people like me should be denied a say over their own death, to be forced to suffer, she was unable to articulate an answer. Since my diagnosis of MND, an incurable terminal illness in 2016, I felt as though my bombs had been dropping on me. I gradually lost the use of all four of my limbs, the ability to speak, swallow, and breathe, and began rapidly deteriorating. I knew my death was inevitable and unavoidable. But I remained strong for my family. I'm 80 years old and I have lived a full life. I did not fear death, but I did fear my journey. I simply wanted to cut the suffering short by a few months. When I eventually got to the green light from Dignitas, the weight lifted. I was able to get on with living without the constant mental anguish over my death. But then as I was saying my final goodbyes, preparing myself for the end, the biggest bomb dropped and I could no longer keep it together. This bomb was in fact an anonymous phone call from social services who informed the police of my plans to go to Switzerland. Within hours, Anne and I were facing a criminal investigation. The thought that I might not make it to Switzerland, or that if I did, Anne might be facing 14 years in jail for helping me, was almost too much to bear. In 52 years of marriage, Anne had not seen me cry. The day we were contacted by the police, I sobbed. I want MPs to know that the change is urgently needed, and this is achievable. Over 1 million people in several American and Australian states across Canada are covered by assisting dying laws, which allow the choice to dying people and protecting others. No family should ever have to endure the torment we have undergone in the recent weeks, but it will be easier to bear knowing that by sharing this contribution to future change, I sincerely hope that you will truly listen to our story and see the suffering you're inflicting by upholding the status quo. Yours sincerely, Jeffrey Whaley. Father of two, Mr. Whaley was diagnosed with motor neuron disease 2 years in December, and doctors told him that he had 6 to 9 months left. He had dinner with his wife and his 2 adopted children, Alex and Dominic, and at the hotel in Zurich last night. Mr. Whaley had left letters for his 4 grandchildren, aged 4 to 17. Mr. Whaley booked flights to Switzerland at a hotel because her husband can no longer use his hands. Mr. Whaley revealed how the stress of his wife being summoned to the police station had destroyed everything he had done to prepare ourselves. He also wrote a letter to the government asking them to reconsider his law-assisted suicide. It was posted online shortly after he died. In the letter, he does not fear death, but he fears the journey. The 80-year-old said that the final weeks of his life had been blighted by visits from social media services. He adds, I want to impress upon the anguish me and my family have experienced, not because of this awful illness, though, of course, this has been incredibly difficult, but because the law against it in this country. No family should ever have to endure the torment we have undergone in recent weeks. Speaking on the BBC, Mr. and Mrs. Whaley discussed their decision to travel to the controversial clinic. Mr. Whaley said that him and his wife reconciled themselves, and the fact that he would end his life gave reasoning behind his decision. Mrs. Whaley also revealed how she was questioned by the Thames Valley police officers in responding to an anonymous call received through the social services. She said the police were clearly not expecting to find a non-abusive situation. They were quite embarrassed. His final limb had gone and he could no longer do anything for himself at all. He can't hold a phone, he can't press numbers, he can't feed himself. And whereas before he could hold a glass of gin and tonic and even put a straw in it, he can't do that. Mrs. Whaley added, it is one of the answers that you wouldn't wish on your own worst enemy. The final weeks or months, which can be particularly gruesome, I decided that I really did not want to go through that, and we were quite reconciled to that. Mr. Wiley decided he wanted an assisted death in Switzerland soon after his diagnosis, but worried police confiscate his passport, so feared the only option would be to starve himself. Police have since dropped the case, although it might be reopened and the new information come to light. Labour peer Lord Falconer criticised the law on BBC Radio Today, arguing that Mr. Wiley could have been given the choice to end his own life. He told the programme the idea that this is anything other than his own choice, so the law is a pig.